The Superior Court buzzed like an old train station, wooden benches humming with whispers, cameras idling in fake patience, pencils scratching legal pads. The AC coughed out a tired chill, no match for the heat of opinions. When the bailiff called, "All rise," the noise folded back like a well-trained tide. Judge Harrison Mitchell slipped through the side door with a floppy folder, gray hair combed flat, a face carved by decades of rulings, boredom, superiority, disdain. Papers smacked the bench, dry and final. "You may sit," he said, eyes skimming past everyone. Valentina stood between two deputies, wrists still marked where the cuffs had bitten. A thin red thread wrapped her wrist, a gift from her grandmother, pressing into her skin like a stubborn memory. Beside her, Patricia Mendoza, a public defender with short steps and deep under eyes, steadied her trembling fingers by gripping a battered notebook. In the front row, prosecutor Thomas Bradford tuned his tie the way a violinist tightens a string before a solo. The State versus Valentina Reyes, wire fraud, identity misrepresentation, aggravated swindle, the clerk intoned, and the room answered with a murmuring chorus, a parallel jury. Bradford rose with theatrical strokes. "We face a young woman who posed as a certified translator in 10 languages, he said, underlining 10 as if it were an insult. She charged premium rates, promised the impossible, and has no diploma, no certificate, no professional grounding whatsoever." Valentina swallowed. It wasn't the volume that hurt. It was the certainty of others that she could not. Repeated often enough, certainty turns into borrowed truth, a rubber stamp on your forehead. Defense? The judge flipped pages like a man searching for patience in a noisy room. Patricia lifted her voice, soft but steady. "My client maintains her innocence, and she's willing to demonstrate the skills she claims to have." Demonstrate? An eyebrow climbed Mitchell's forehead. "What is this? An audition? Will she sing in 10 languages?" Laughter popped against the walls. Bradford let the judge carry the mockery and smiled with thin lips. Valentina lifted her chin into the harsh ceiling light. "Permission to speak, Your Honor." Breath held. The judge set his pen down. "Do you have something relevant to add, Ms. Reyes?" And yes, she inhaled like a diver. "I speak 10 languages," she let it echo. "And I can prove it now." The judge's laugh began as a contained thunder and avalanched. "Of course you can, and I'm a polyglot too." The laughter multiplied, the ceiling vibrating with a circus's casual cruelty. Valentina didn't blink. "With respect," she cut through the noise, "you just judged me without hearing me. Is this justice or spectacle?" Silence fell, heavy. Patricia touched Valentina's elbow, a plea for calm with her eyes. Officer Cooper, a broad man with compassion hidden in his jawline, took a half step forward, ready to intervene. Mitchell's gavel cracked. Wood and metal struck sparks no one could see. "Watch your footing, Ms. Reyes. This courtroom is not a stage." The bracelet tightened on her wrist, flash of a backyard with laundry on the line, and an old voice saying, "Speak softly when they try to silence you, and save fire for when they ask for ice." "Then let me prove it," she said, clear. 10 languages. Here." Bradford saw open space and danced into it. Why should the state spend resources to legitimize a fantasy? This isn't a talent show. "Because the state's duty is to seek truth," Valentina answered, "not to confirm its prejudices." The judge's eyes narrowed, scanning the room. He could feel it, that restless itch, reporters leaning in, a kid journalist with a nervous pen, mothers of defendants perched on bench edges. The story was too good to shut down. The court's ego needs an audience too. Mitchell sighed. Fine. To the clerk. Contact the state university. In 3 days, I want 10 faculty experts, one for each language Ms. Reyes claims to speak. Bradford opened his mouth, surprised by the risk. Be advised, Ms. Reyes. The judge lowered his voice, savoring the threat. If you fail, and you will, I'll add contempt. The current moved from Valentina's wrist to her spine, not fear, electricity. When this is over, you'll owe me an apology. A breathy "oh" swept the benches like wind over grass. The gavel crushed the astonishment. Hearing adjourned. 3 days. The deputies closed in. As she was let out, the room churned to a sea again. Hands raised, questions bubbling up. Is it true you speak Mandarin? Where are you from? How old are you? Who taught you? With each question, memory stitched pieces of childhood inside her. She was 5 when life changed addresses. 1 bus curve, 2 bodies, and a grandmother. Lucia Reyes lifted her with hands smelling of soap and promises. In a cramped apartment, pots on nails, the radio stuck on foreign stations, Lucia cleaned homes for diplomats, Germans with heavy books, perfumed French families, Arabs who carried spices that lit the tongue. Every house, a language. Every language, a shelter. Valentina sat cross-legged with the kids, toys scattered, notebooks of ideograms, flashcards of definite and indefinite articles, vowels already curving toward tomorrow. Don't memorize words, her grandmother said. Learn how they move. But the world loves doors that open only with paper keys. Years later, Valentina knocked on agencies and heard the same broken sentence. Without a degree? So she built her own road. Online profiles, spotless work, whispered referrals, until someone decided the impossible couldn't be real, and where doubt sleeps, accusation wakes. In the hallway, Patricia hugged the case file to her chest and let out a breath. You nearly killed me in there. Thank you for letting me speak. I didn't let you. You simply spoke. The lawyer almost smiled at herself. But it was necessary. Across the hall, Bradford whispered orders to an aide, keywords low and clipped. Hard-nosed professors, no loopholes, no warm and fuzzy. Valentina ached to answer in Russian, then Arabic, just to tip their certainty off its axis. She saved the fire. 3 days. And 3 days can be everything when your whole life has been rehearsal. They'll take you to the New Hope Detention Center, Patricia said, returning to bureaucracy. I'll request study materials, but they don't promise anything. I need time and quiet. Quiet I can get. Time. She checked a watch that kept urgency instead of hours. We'll fight for it. The county van shuddered over patched asphalt. Valentina stared at her forehead's reflection in the grated window. Outside, life stayed ordinary. Bikers in a hurry, vendors pushing carts, a little girl with a backpack bigger than her back. The red bracelet shone like a fresh wound. Inside New Hope, the irony brushed her skin. White tiles, lights that flickered with fatigue, a disinfectant smell pulling a thin blanket over other odors. Cell 47C, said Officer Torres, practical voice, harmless gaze. You'll have a roommate. Metal sang. The woman on the lower bunk looked up from her book, gray hair braided with patience, wrinkles like chapters. So you're the polyglot, she said, not unkindly, just confirming hallway news. I'm Carmen. Valentina dropped onto the top bunk. The wood groaned. I'm just someone tired of being called a liar. We all are. Carmen closed the book, marking her page with a bus ticket. Some of us learn to whisper our pain, others translate it. Valentina snorted. Translation is the only thing they left me. Who taught you? Carmen asked, making room with her eyes. My grandmother. She spoke 6 languages. No diploma, no stamps. I learned with kids, in kitchens, from contracts left on tables. The moldy ceiling became a screen, memories projected in silence. When she died, I had her voice and this bracelet. She touched the red thread. She said it would remind me that courage doesn't have to show up. It just has to stay. Carmen nodded with the wisdom of someone who has weathered tides. You'll need it. 10 professors. They'll try to break you with jargon. Let them try. The line walked out ahead of doubt. Back at the courthouse, hours before the escort, the skinny reporter from the front row, Marco Delgado, balanced a cheap coffee and expensive curiosity. The girl said, "I can prove it now," and the judge laughed. He whispered to a colleague, "If she shuts him up, that's a headline and maybe a promotion." The colleague rolled her eyes, or a resignation letter if the judge reads you. In chambers, Mitchell rubbed his temples. He hated being challenged, especially in front of an audience. But something in the girl's voice, it wasn't the content, it was the continent, as if words had topography. 10 experts, he repeated to his clerk, the toughest you can find. The machine spun up, phones rang, schedules were rearranged, egos sharpened. Bradford on the phone called out names. Miller for German, Hassan for Arabic, Volkov for Russian, someone who enjoys finding fault. On the other end, a staffer laughed, already halfway there. And for Portuguese? Brazilian, the kind who hates accents. We'll find one. Perfect, Bradford said. The court needs standards, not a show. Night tried to fall in the cell block. The women's wing was a river that never slept. Whispers, muffled laughter, a soft crying from the far corridor. Valentina turned on her side. Sleep's nerve, loose. She pictured languages as constellations, Mandarin with tonal stars, German clicking gears, Arabic spilling poetry at the edges, Portuguese winding and swaying, French laughing through its nose. Do you really think you can do it? Carmen asked in the dark. I can't afford to doubt. Then tell me something, in the language of courage. Valentina closed her eyes and saw Lucia's kitchen, pots singing, a magazine cutout map on the wall. In Hebrew, quietly, she whispered a simple line about staying. Translated, it sounded ordinary. In the right tongue, it drew a place for the heart to rest. Carmen didn't understand the words. She understood the temperature. Good night, kid. On rounds, Officer Torres slowed when she heard the whisper. Some people arrived carrying nothing but anger. Others brought entire worlds. 3 days, she murmured to herself, unsure if she was rooting for the girl or for the protocol. Morning broke, rinsed clean, as if the sky had cried for someone else. Pale silver light slipped through the tall windows and spilled along stained walls. Valentina had been up before dawn, reciting syllables like secret prayers, each language a prayer, each word a step out of silence. Coffee, Carmen announced, nudging an aluminum cup. Or what's left of it. Thank you. You're welcome, polyglot. Carmen settled, tightening her braid. Dream? My grandmother. She used to say fear doesn't die. We just learn to talk to it. Ask it to be quiet for a few days, Carmen teased. You'll need the space. Boots in the hall. Torres swung the door. Reyes, council visit. Patricia came in with a face creased by sleeplessness and a stack of crumpled photocopies. I brought what I could. She dropped manuals, newspapers, a folder stamped with university seals. They confirmed 10 professors and an official interpreter at each table. It's going to be an arena. Which languages? Patricia read. German, French, Arabic, Russian, Mandarin, Portuguese, Italian, Japanese, English, and Guarani. Valentina arched a brow. Guarani? The judge wants to avoid elitist languages only. He said we should honor linguistic diversity. Valentina let out a disbelieving laugh. Or he wants to watch me trip on an indigenous language almost no one outside the forest carries in their mouth. They know what they're doing, Patricia admitted. They might not know who they're dealing with. Across town, Bradford walked State University's corridor with a stride owned by men who think truth belongs to them. Professor Volkov waited, black coffee in hand, brow knotted. So it's true? Asked the Russian. We're testing an autodidact? A fraud, said Bradford. Keep the theatrics down. This is a hearing, not a talent show. Volkov shrugged. I don't judge. I listen. Do more than that, Bradford said. Take her apart. The request hung like elegant menace, but as Volkov glanced at the folder labeled Valentina Reyes, a curiosity flickered, one he'd never confess. Back in the cell, Valentina read aloud, adjusting cadence and breath. Carmen watched, delighted. You stitch the air when you speak. I learned to. My grandmother said languages are different fabrics, but the body is the same. And what did she do before nannying? She taught school on the border. Then the school shut down. She started cleaning houses, but she never stopped teaching. Kept a notebook with words she found beautiful, in any tongue. Valentina pulled a notebook from her folder, yellowed pages crowded with colorful notes. At the top of the first page, learning is remembering the world fits in your mouth. Lucia's pen was firm, almost musical. Valentina traced the margins with a fingertip and breathed. She said words can wound or heal. I want mine to heal. Carmen nodded, moved. Then heal the world in there, girl. At court, Judge Mitchell scrolled headlines. The case had found small front pages. The courtroom polyglot, fraud or prodigy. He loathed the attention, but a hidden pride wanted to prove he was right. His aide, Lawton, hedged. With respect, Your Honor, if she nails half, the press will call her a genius. If she misses one, they'll call her a fraud. Public opinion is simple math, the judge said, and crowds prefer stories of falling. That afternoon, Patricia arranged a special video call. Engineer David Chen, a former client, agreed to testify. A middle-aged man with a gentle voice and kind eyes appeared on screen. Ms. Reyes translated engineering documents from Mandarin to Spanish without a single error, he said. I've hired certified translators at 10 times her rate who still miss the basics. Why didn't you testify sooner? Patricia asked. Because she asked for silence. She said she wanted to win on her own merit. Valentina looked down, embarrassed. I didn't think anyone would believe me. And still you tried. Chen smiled. That's a language the world understands. Courage. When the judge heard, he almost struck the testimony as emotionally biased. But it was too late. The story had already bled into social feeds. Thousands wrote, "Let the girl speak." That night, Torres paused at the bars. "Good luck tomorrow," she said quietly. "Thank you. Can I ask one thing?" "Of course. When you get out, talk about us. The women who stay, the ones no one hears." Valentina met her eyes. "I promise." Carmen watched the exchange and murmured, "Every person who believes in you is a new word learned. You'll need them all." Before sunrise, Torres hurried Valentina to the visitor's room. Unscheduled visit, she said, eyes saying be careful and trust at once. The air tasted like metal and hurry. On the other side of the table, an Asian man in a rumpled suit clutched an envelope like a life raft. "Mr. Chen?" Valentina's hand flew to her mouth. He nodded, dark circles deep. "Ms. Reyes." I lied. His voice cracked. "Your translations were perfect. I signed a report calling them defective to protect my boss and my job." Valentina's stomach tightened. "Why?" "Because my director threatened me. He said if I admitted I hired an uncertified translator, I'd be fired. Corporate legal suggested reversing payment by declaring your work inadequate." He pushed the envelope toward her. "These are the original emails, partner approvals from Beijing praising your work, and my sworn statement. I accept the consequences." Torres shifted in the doorway to shield the moment. "This needs to be filed," she said, breaking the trance of remorse. "It will," Valentina promised, palms sealing the envelope like a pact. "Thank you for coming back." Patricia burst in, breath tripping over itself. "What was that?" "A truth, late to its appointment." Valentina handed her the envelope. Patricia scanned, blinking fast, fighting relief. "With this, the prosecutor's castle starts losing bricks." She hugged the papers close, like a heart. And the psych report came in. Unconventional personality. High confidence in autodidactic skills. No signs of delusion. Valentina smiled, crooked. Translation: doesn't fit the form. Translation: they can't call you crazy. At the university, coffee burned and egos preened. Professor Andres Villarreal, jacket a size larger than his humility, messaged colleagues. They'll bring specialty texts for each language. No tourist small talk. Replies pinged back. Approved. No mercy. Maximum rigor. In a legal forum where reporters fished for rumors, Delgado typed, "New round, technical pieces, and rare manuscripts." He clicked his tongue. If this flips, it becomes a movie. The courtroom felt larger that day, not by architecture, but by expectation stretching the air. 10 professors sat in a row. Official interpreters adjusted headsets. IT forensics waited like data surgeons. Mitchell entered, less stiff. News from the early morning had bitten his certainty. "We proceed with a technical phase," he announced. "To avoid claims of improvisation, the defendant will be tested with specialty texts." Bradford straightened, renewed by the idea that technical paper is a wall. Patricia, with Chen's envelope, waited to remind the wall it was still paper. They started with German contracts. Müller handed over a merger clause dripping like a leaky faucet. Valentina read, translated, explained the drafting traps, and offered 2 safer rewrites. Müller arched his brows, seeing a chess move he'd missed. On to medical Mandarin. Professor Tanaka asked her to differentiate 2 near synonyms for stent in regional usage. Valentina tuned the tones like a violin and added why some Chinese hospitals prefer a more descriptive metaphor over the clinical term. "Because the body needs to understand too," she said. Tanaka wrote, smiling. Classical Arabic followed. Hassan's excerpt braided theology and philosophy. Valentina recited, then said, "In Arabic, the triliteral root is a tree. Translation that ignores roots mispicks fruit." Hassan set his pen down. Agreed. Russian. Volkov chose dry Soviet courtroom prose. Valentina kept its sandpaper feel, then rewrote into clear legal Portuguese without blunting the original hardness. Volkov scratched his chin, amused. "You don't fear snow." French. A passage about terroir and protected designations. Valentina answered with nose, mouth, and soil. Some wine words aren't translated. We host them. Très bien, the professor murmured, almost intimate. Brazilian Portuguese. A no-nonsense professor threw regional slang and legalese at her. Valentina moved between registers with ease, from juridiques to street market chatter, and added a story about a neighbor, Dona Marta, who mixed proverbs with case law under laundry lines. Laughter loosened the room. Japanese next. She stepped between kanji and kana like short and long steps across a wooden bridge. In Italian, she let opera rise into a tax statute. In English, she exposed the false transparency of friendly cognates. A theater of skepticism was suddenly leaning in. One remains, Villarreal announced, eyes gleaming without admiration. Hebrew. The word hung with the weight of old stone. From his folder, he drew a philosophical treatise on ethics and justice. Paper smelling of library dust, and the vanity of someone who thinks they've found the perfect trap. Read, interpret, translate. Explain your lexical choices. Valentina's gaze settled on the text. The silence changed color. Her eyes didn't stumble, they recognized. A hidden muscle pulsed in memory. This text. Her voice carried the sound of someone turning onto a childhood street. I know it. Villarreal's smirk tilted. Doubtful you've handled manuscripts of this nature. Not this manuscript. She lifted the page carefully. This translation, because I was the one who made it. Air thinned. Delgado nearly dropped his pen. Patricia froze, a statue with a beating heart. Explain, the judge demanded, his skepticism now curious. When I was 17, Valentina said, I worked through an online platform. An anonymous client commissioned this exact treatise. I spent 3 weeks diving into roots, exegesis, layers of meaning. I kept everything, drafts, notes, emails. They're on my laptop, currently in the state's custody. Bradford shot up. Objection. Self-serving, unproven claims. Proof exists, Your Honor, Patricia answered, silky and firm. In state custody. We request immediate access. Villarreal stepped forward, paling. Any resemblance is coincidence. The text is public. Interpretations, not my lexical inventions. Valentina cut in, respectful but steady. There's a metaphor I refuse to betray. A neologism I created, right there, line for line. Mitchell stared at Villarreal, remembering his own laughter from days ago and how it still stung. Officer, bring it and unlock the defense drive under supervision, now. The tech opened a forensic case like a piano. Minutes later, a mirrored screen lit the courtroom. Plants turned toward light. People leaned toward the glow. Folder, Jobs 2019. Subfolder, Hebrew Ethics, Patricia guided. Files, draft1.docs, draft2.docs, final.docs, and the PDFs. The first draft bloomed, a margin note in Portuguese. Choose uprightness, not justice here. Preserve semantic field. Another file showed emails, the anonymous client praising, your solution for term X is brilliant. Compare, Valentina said softly. Patricia handed up the published article, signed by Villarreal. Blood drained from his face as if a lamp had been switched off. Side-by-side tool, the judge ordered. Lines lit up. Identical, identical, identical. A tweak here, a cosmetic swap there. Hassan stood, grief and anger braided. In our field, this has a name. Plagiarism, Mueller said, dry as paper. I received it from a colleague, thought it was public, Villarreal stammered. You thought little, Volkov said quietly. And little things ruin reputations. Mitchell inhaled, gavel hovering. Professor Villarreal, get a lawyer. To the rest. Does anyone here still question Ms. Reyes's linguistic competence? Heads shook one by one. Hassan added, competence and integrity of method. Bradford sagged over papers that no longer mattered. Patricia touched Chen's envelope. Before we proceed, the defense files proof that at least one claim of defective translation was manufactured for corporate cover. She handed the exhibits. The judge read emails, the sworn statement, foreign partners' praise. The room churned like a sea after a storm. Mitchell looked at Bradford. Counsel? Bradford swallowed. Request, a recess. Denied. The judge's voice cut clean. Truth doesn't need a break. Carmen clasped her hands, whisper watching from the TV in the officer's room. Sophia smiled alone in a detention hallway and whispered, go. Mitchell adjusted his robe, a stalling gesture with no time left. In light of what we've examined, and what this court has witnessed, the technical phase is complete. I will rule shortly. Silence pooled. The minute before rain. Outside, the city stood on tiptoe. Delgado opened a new draft. Faculty plagiarism exposed. Defendant unmasks mirror text. Court shakes. The gavel lifted, and the heavy door groaned open. A silver-haired woman stood in the threshold, badge flashing power. Apologies, Your Honor. I'm Linda Harrington, CEO of Harrington Global Translation. She looked straight at Valentina. I have urgent information about Lucia Reyes. The name hit the room like a stone in still water, ripples reaching everyone. Valentina felt her wrist burn where the bracelet had snapped the night before, as if it were still there. The court has not ruled, Mitchell said. And perhaps your ruling needs what I bring, Harrington answered. Not arrogant, just urgent. This story started before this room. Time paused. Between breath and word, a whole legacy asked for entry. If it's about my grandmother, I need to hear it, Valentina said. Then listen, Harrington lifted a leather folder. Because the world that wants you silent started by silencing her. Mitchell breathed like a man opening a window in a storm. 15-minute recess. No one leaves the building. The gavel cracked, splitting the morning into before and after the name Lucia. The corridor became a tunnel of held breaths. Cameras blinked like hungry eyes. Patricia walked beside Valentina without speaking. Some silences say more than advice. Harrington's presence parted the hallway without asking permission. In a side room, the judge waited with his robe folded on a chair, sleeves rolled up, face caught between fatigue and disbelief. Explain yourself, Ms. Harrington. Quickly. We've crossed from unprecedented into improbable. Lucia Reyes worked for my company, Harrington said, laying the folder down. In 1987, when Harrington Global was just finding its feet, she cleaned the translation department at night. She had a habit of reviewing texts left on desks, marking corrections, offering alternatives. One of my partners found out. She was fired for exceeding her role. The word fired hit like a stone in a still pond. And then? Patricia asked, voice rough with feeling. Then I found an old archive box. Inside, handwritten samples signed only LR, matching published projects credited to translators who later won awards. Harrington took a breath. Lucia was the invisible translator behind documents that shaped international agreements, and yes, the company profited. I became CEO years later. Only now do I see the size of the wrong. Valentina's knees almost gave. Carmen pressed a palm to her chest in the officer's room. Torres froze mid-round. You're saying, the judge said, This young woman is being tried for the same crime her grandmother suffered, being too competent for the place the system allowed her. Exactly, Harrington said. I came to clear a name, even if late. This is emotionalism, Bradford tried. It doesn't change. Sit down, Thomas, Patricia cut in, voice bright with fierce dignity. You spent days trying to crush a woman for lacking a stamp. Now the world knows her talent comes from a lineage that built bridges while mopping your sacred floors. Bradford stared at papers that had turned to dust. I want to see that folder, the judge said. Harrington opened it. Inside, yellowed pages with meticulous notes, thin blue pen strokes, margin comments in several languages, and in the corner, a shy signature. Lucia. Valentina touched the paper with her fingertips. Tears arrived uninvited. I know this handwriting. Then Lucia didn't just raise a translator, the judge said softly. She built a quiet school of dignity. The hearing resumed. Mitchell put the robe back on, wearing it like a different symbol now. Patricia officially submitted the corporate manipulation, Chen's statement, and Villarreal's plagiarism record. The judge listened with the patience truth requires. He closed his eyes for a second, then breathed. Ms. Reyes, please stand. Valentina stood, the red thread now retied with a new knot swung lightly. This court finds the fraud charges baseless, built on false testimony and institutional bias. The defendant is acquitted on all counts. The gavel's crack sounded like a door unlocking. And furthermore, he continued, this court recommends the Department of Education and State University revise certification pathways for self-taught translators. Talent doesn't need permission to exist. And applause surged, cautious from some professors, rueful and sincere from others. Bradford gathered his empty briefcase and slipped out. Valentina hugged Patricia. You believed when no one did. I just translated what was already inside you, Patricia said, eyes shining. Outside, rain began. Valentina lifted her face. Each drop washed a century of injustice. Harrington approached, offering Lucia's folder. Keep it. It belongs to your family. Thank you. No, thank you for proving her gift didn't die. Hours later, with cameras gone, the courtroom stood quiet. Mitchell lingered, staring at the gavel. His aide peeked in. Heading out, Judge? In a minute. Thinking about tomorrow's remarks? Thinking about how to apologize correctly. That night, Valentina and Patricia walked past a bookstore window. Dictionaries, maps, the glow of belonging. Will you start your own school? Patricia asked. I don't know. Maybe a library. Or a channel with free classes. People need to know knowledge isn't a luxury. In the glass, their reflections braided past and present. For just a second, Valentina saw behind her own face. Lucia's, smiling, apron floral, hands inked with soap. Thank you, Grandma, she whispered. The wind tugged the red thread as if to answer, I'm still here. At State, Volkov typed, effective immediately. I recognize Valentina Reyes as a full translator and honorary instructor. Hassan replied, some languages aren't learned, they're remembered. Muller added, and sometimes the teacher is silence. In the city's heart, something new kindled. On the square, people lit candles, students, immigrants, housekeepers, kids with hand-drawn signs. For Lucia, for Valentina, for every voice the world tried to hush. Valentina slipped in without announcement. A little girl offered a candle. Are you the language lady? I am. Teach me a pretty word. In Guarani, aguije means gratitude. Yeah? That's it. What does it mean? It means the world can change with a word. Flames trembled in her eyes. For the first time in a long time, past and present spoke the same language. High in the courthouse, a single window burned. Mitchell wrote a short, unsigned note he planned to leave on Lucia's grave the next day. "Forgive us for needing your granddaughter to hear what you already said." He folded it. Lights out. Rain returned to fill the world. Justice arrives late sometimes, but it arrives, with an accent, with tears, and with courage. Later, at Carmen's request, Valentina opened a blank notebook. "This is our book of unwritten words," she said. "Whenever the world lacks a term for what you feel, invent one. Give a home to what has no address yet." By week's end, letters came. One on court letterhead, Judge Mitchell requested a meeting. Another, handwritten, slanted, firm, to Valentina from David Chen. He thanked her for the sleep he'd recovered and attached a donation to scholarships. "My daughter needed proof that right can still win." A child's drawing came with it. A heart framed by 4 words. "Thank you, language lady." Valentina pressed the paper to her chest. Her own heartbeat answered. Mitchell met her on a park bench, robe traded for humility, an envelope in hand. Leaves rehearsed a choreography of forgiveness. "I owe you an apology," he said simply. "I laughed at you. I laughed at your grandmother without knowing. I laughed at a multitude who learned through other doors. I built authority on that sound. It was an expensive laugh." "I'm no judge," she said, watching the hands that had struck so many gavels. "But I know some mistakes only find their way back through humility." He handed her the envelope. "A memo to the Oversight Board, proposing protocol changes. Room to prove competence without certificates. Less worship of form, deeper commitment to truth. It'll take time, but time is a good student when the lesson is just." Valentina signed as witness. "Justice is a language of long verbs," she said. "You conjugate it slowly." Saturday, she visited Lucia. The cemetery lay like a silent book, marble pages, chapters of names. She brought simple flowers and the plain covered notebook. Kneeling, she tidied the stone as if fixing a pillow, set the folder labeled Living Archive beside it, and opened it like a reliquary. "Grandma, it worked," she spoke softly, her voice arriving in several tongues as if each wanted a turn. The world listened. Not all of it, but enough to begin. The trees answered with their own language. On the first page, she wrote a new word, reflower. Below it, a free translation. To bloom again, where gray once lived. Sun lit the red thread. It was a strand, but also a lighthouse. The program grew faster than any official curriculum allows. Soon there was an online Monday class, with people from small towns and other countries, hybrid Saturdays, and an open help desk that turned into story circles. Sophia ran the library, each book labeled blue for learn by ear, yellow for learn by skin, green for learn by work. Torres organized circles with women from the prison system, carrying letters and dreams into the room. Carmen led a writing club, words to begin again, pages read between tears and laughter. Linda lent conference booths for a mirrored community translation room, stickers on the walls. Talent doesn't need permission. Volkov taught cold and precision for contracts. Hassan guided roots and poetry for etymology lovers. Muller pruned subordinate clauses like rosebushes. One warm afternoon, Valentina played a grainy video. Lucia, younger, smiling in a kitchen, explaining in simple Spanish why cola is spoon, and also a verb, to gather. The room fell into the kind of hush that meets origin. She talked about gathering the world, Valentina said, voice wavering without breaking, and giving it back in dignified words. A student raised a hand, eyes wet. How do you say "don't give up" in Guarani? Valentina remembered the girl in the square. She answered and explained the phrase's force, something Portuguese can't fully hold. The student smiled. I found a new home for my hope. That night, an email arrived from far away. I'm Maria, 16, from a village where the wind is another language. I speak 5 tongues I learned from travelers and markets. No one believes me. Can I try? Valentina answered without checking the clock. Yes, tell me your story. Class 1 starts now. She closed the laptop. Geneva flickered in her mind as an old promise, maybe someday, not to flee, but to chase Lucia's ghost in steel archives. For now, the world was large enough here. She wrote a second new word. Re-listen. To hear again. To hear better. To hear what didn't fit before. Her phone buzzed. Patricia. 2 quick questions for your video's ending, she teased. You know your story is going up on the channel, right? The world needs what you learned. Ask, Valentina laughed, sinking into the couch. I'll answer in any language. Patricia listed commitments, ideas, invitations. Then, a good silence, perfectly sized for a moral. Friend, she said at last, voice introducing something big. You turned the courthouse into the most human place in town. No, Valentina corrected. The city taught me the language I was missing. She glanced at the bracelet. The new knot was already fraying, asking for another. She tied one, then another. Some things you learn forever. In the room's soft dark, the entire lesson finally unfolded. It was never about proving she spoke 10 or 11 languages. It was about remembering that every language is another way to say life. And life, translated with care, heals. An imaginary camera pulled back from the window. The city breathed with her. Somewhere between an old voice and a voice being born, the world understood. You can't silence what someone learned to say with her own heart. Gold rose over facades and over dreams. People walked with new steps, some carrying books, others carrying courage. On the courthouse flagpoles, fabric trembled as if the language itself had learned to begin again. And in that instant, between silence and word, the story leaves the court and lands with you. Which word or moment spoke to you the most in this story? Where are you watching from? And which talent of yours deserves to be heard? This story reminds us that true energy comes from within, the kind that renews us every day. If this story touched your heart, check the pinned comment to discover products that inspire renewal and balance. Leave a like and subscribe to join us in our next story.